Part 35. A Middle School Cartoonist. Author, Mao Do Sde Mao. Chapter 341. After learning that Makoto Takahashi and Eiji Niizuma were already waiting at the front desk of the Uesha lobby, Yoshida and Yujiro looked at each other with helpless expressions on their faces. Before the editor-in-chief could give instructions, the two of them ran out in a hurry. Although both Yoshida and Yujiro wanted to drag the two of them out and beat them up at the moment, but they were just thinking about it. If they really took action, with Takahashi Makoto's strength, they might not know who would torture and kill the other. Say. The two editors who had just stepped out of the elevator saw the two cartoonists standing in the lobby at a glance. Eiji Niizuma has a wing-like paintbrush inserted between his neck and is looking around, while Makoto Takahashi is still wearing a white coat as always, with one hand in the pocket of the white coat and the other hand holding a mobile phone. According to Yoshida's visual inspection, it seems that Makoto Takahashi is having a secondary normal call with a mysterious figure. It's me. The current location where I am currently appears to be a normal company, but according to the intelligence provided by the Revolutionary Army, it is actually a hidden stronghold of a hostile organization. Because this time it was an accidental collision. He wanted to sneak in, so he did not apply for support from the higher UPS of the association in advance. Seeing Yoshida walking towards him angrily, Takahashi Makoto showed a panicked look on his face, turned around and walked to an inconspicuous corner, covering his hands with his hands. He whispered on the phone. The disguise spell did not take effect. Yes, the identity has been revealed. Well, according to what was said before, if we show up at the agreed place 30 minutes later, then it means unfortunately, I have been killed in battle. Hey! Cheng! Wild Makoto Takahashi suddenly appeared from the crowd. Yoshida opened his backpack. Yoshida used the Master Ball on Makoto Takahashi. But it failed. It seemed to have no effect on Makoto Takahashi. Makoto Takahashi ran away. So please press the detonation device at that time and let me die in a heroic way. Makoto Takahashi evaded Yoshida's pursuit and spoke hurriedly into the phone as if leaving his last words, if you can't find my body, please tell the witch that I love her. Let her destroy the world and bury her with me. The rest is up to you, partner. Looking at Makoto Takahashi, who suddenly stopped dodging, Yoshida wanted to go up and use a super killing skill similar to killing a girl in the arms, but when he thought about it, he might be directly and brutally divided into 17 parts by Makoto Takahashi. After that, Yoshida's claws stretched out towards Takahashi. Makoto stopped in mid-air, but Takahashi Makoto seemed not to notice, standing there with his eyes closed and a dull look on his face. It's already this time, what are you still doing here? Yujiro, who had already captured his new wife Eiji with a high-level ball, looked at Yoshida, who was trying to capture Takahashi Makoto, who was inexplicably sluggish, and was annoyed. He complained, Yoshida, take the Phoenix Academy teacher to see the editor now. If it continues to be delayed, the archive is complete. You can continue the mission. Makoto Takahashi suddenly opened his eyes, looked at Yoshida beside him, who was hesitant to speak, and sneered, Humph. My beloved cat, I know what you want to say. Although the King of Black Flame and I also want to meet with the editor, what is about to happen will have a major impact on the future world line. Therefore, according to the common sense of our world, before making a fate-determining choice, you should develop a good habit of saving your progress. Yes, yes. Now that Cheng has completed the archive, can you continue the current mission? He waved his hand to stop Yujiro, who wanted to complain to Takahashi Makoto. After Yoshida winked, he led Takahashi Makoto to depart from the editor-in-chief's floor. Although I have been here before, but... Makoto Takahashi squinted his right eye and glanced at the busy staff in the editorial department. After a moment of pause, he turned to Yoshida and made a suggestion, my beloved cat, you guys, isn't the configuration of the organization too weak? Let's not talk about the black technology dimensional teleportation device, at least the gate, is also equipped with an artificial intelligence recognition device, right? Cheng, please stop it. Where's the editorial department equipped with such high-tech equipment? This is just the editorial department of Shonen Jump, not the stronghold of the evil organization in the novels and comics. Yoshida performed a long-lost three-stage move. After complaining, looking at Makoto Takahashi with disdain on his face, he resisted the urge to kick him, turned to Eiji Nizuma and said, "Nizuma-kun, the editor-in-chief already knows that the two of you completed the manga. If you want this comic to be serialized, you must find a way to convince the editor." "Man, I have already saved and backed up the archive before. At worst, I will just close the program later and then load the archive again," Makoto Takahashi said calmly. "So, now you know why Yoshida doesn't want to communicate with Takahashi Makoto, right?" "Understood." In response to Yoshida's warning, Nitsuma Eiji politely saluted and expressed his gratitude. "Thank you for your assistance, Yoshida Pavilion." "No, my beloved cat, sir." "It's my beloved cat, not Yoshida." "Even Shinzuma-kun, When he saw the snickering Yujiro, Yoshida realized his slip of the tongue and suddenly felt like breaking the glass and jumping off the building. "Idea. Can I apply for file reading?" "Hello." Yoshida no is really shameless and morally corrupt. After entering the conference room, facing the serious editor-in-chief, Makoto Takahashi and Eiji Nizuma looked dark and calm, while Yujiro and Yoshida looked quite nervous. After this comparison, it turns out that the gap between the editor's side and the cartoonist's side is not that big. At least half of it. It's really a judgment call. I already have a rough idea of the situation. Now that the mangaka himself is here, I won't say any more nonsense. Makoto Takahashi and Eiji Nizuma, if you are really sure that you want to serialize the manga Pula Magi Madoka Magica, theoretically, it's possible. But the editor looked at Makoto Takahashi and Eiji Nizuma, who were sitting on his left and right, and showed a very strong side. "The condition is that you must give me a reason to agree to your serialization. You know, both of you have comic strips in the weekly magazine Shonen Jump." "Why, can you not tell me?" The person who spoke was Makoto Takahashi. Eiji Shinzuma acted like he was following Makoto Takahashi's lead. The two cartoonists had already negotiated on the way here. When they arrived at the editorial office, all matters of negotiation were handed over to Makoto Takahashi, who has a master's degree in diplomacy. Because if you want to listen to God's will as a mortal, the prerequisite is not to reach the level of an absolute ability user. It seems that you, editor-in-chief of Visual Glasses, have not reached this level yet, right? Don't you want to say it? As the editor-in-chief, you still need to have some tolerance, especially when facing a Chuyunibu who is making fun of you. Not paying attention to Takahashi Makoto's words, the editor-in-chief Pingbo just nodded slightly. "In that case, then I can only say. Wait. Does this mean, I have entered the Honkai Blackening branch?" After interrupting the editor's unfinished words unceremoniously, Takahashi Makoto suddenly stood up, and under the astonished eyes of everyone, he ran out in a hurry. Before anyone could react, Takahashi Makoto came in from the door again, and sat down in the same seat with a calm expression. Smiled very proudly, and said to the editor-in-chief as if he was coming to praise me, "I just accidentally entered the destruction ending because I chose the wrong option, so I just reloaded the file. Shit, let's continue the topic we just talked about. Skip the previous conversation, I remember it started here, right?" This time, it was not just the two editors with twitching mouths who were silent this time. Even the editor-in-chief, who had been trying his best to remain calm, had the urge to slap Takahashi Makoto. As for Eiji Shinzuma, he has been smiling and maintaining his status as a spectator. This is the so-called godly teammate. By the way, Makoto Takahashi, are you just showing off your lower limit of moral integrity? The so-called file loading and so on, are all just excuses. Speaking of the editor-in-chief of Glasses, what is the root cause of the so-called progress and development of human beings? Makoto Takahashi stood on his seat, shook his white coat, and turned on the madness mode. Human beings have never been born, living in competition and elimination. People who are born to run fast, people who are beautiful, people whose parents are poor, people who have diseases, we are all different in birth, growth, and talents. That's right. To prevent being eliminated, human beings will fight and compete with each other. It is in this continuous progress and development that society will continue to evolve. So fight. Only in this way can there be so-called competition. As a result, there will be a so-called future. So, whether it's the Phoenix Academy's Kuma, the new wife Eiji, or even a Jumumenha who seems extremely ferocious during this period, isn't it because they are constantly evolving and growing while fighting each other? If you want to make progress, to develop, in addition to working hard like Xiao Li, you also need a being who aspires to transcendence. Therefore, the original intention of Xi and Heiken's appearance is to let cartoonists keep fighting and make cartoonists keep improving. It follows the great will of the world, and it is also an inevitable choice in the history of human development. All of these are the choices of Steins Gate. Oh. Teacher Phoenix Academy is right? Bravo. As soon as Takahashi Makoto finished speaking, Eiji, the new wife, immediately cheered. This is the tacit cooperation between Wangji's teammates. So, what you want to say, Makoto Takahashi, is. He rubbed his forehead with a headache. The editor-in-chief of Bottle can now finally understand the powerlessness that the former editor-in-chief felt when facing Makoto Takahashi. Is the serialization of the manga Puella Magi Madoka Magica meant to stimulate the mangaka who are serializing it, so that everyone can continue to make progress while fighting with each other? Hey! Sure enough, those who wear glasses are all fox-like creatures. Is this a boast? Is this really a boast? Why do you, Makoto Takahashi, act so unwillingly disgusted? Even so, ahem, our editorial department has to rediscuss the serialization issue of Puella Magi Madoka Magica. How could a person as cunning as the editor-in-chief of a bottle give an immediate reply to Makoto Takahashi? But thank you, Phoenix Academy teacher, for your explanation. It's a time like this, Is it already this time? Makoto Takahashi glanced at the electronic clock on the table, a look of astonishment appeared on his face, and he jumped down from the chair. Oops! I forgot about it. Today is the day to get the initial elf. My beloved cats, I'll leave the rest to you. HN, wait a minute. Seeing Makoto Takahashi evacuate with a flash, Yoshida bowed slightly to the editor-in-chief and immediately chased after him. My familiar cat, are you also a new trainer starting from Jingxin Town? Let's talk about it together. Makoto Takahashi watched Yoshida squeeze into the elevator with a kind smile on his face, but let me say it first, okay? My initial partner has been decided to be Charmander. You are not allowed to compete with me. Steal your sister. By the way, what the hell is Charmander? Yoshida used silence to suppress his strong complaints. After taking a deep breath, he looked at Makoto Takahashi seriously. What you just said, Chen, is about letting cartoonists those words of continuously improving in competition with each other. Is this your original intention of serializing Puella Magi Madoka Magica? Of course, no. After listening to Yoshida's words, Takahashi Makoto immediately changed his expression to a disdainful expression. If I didn't say this, the serialization thing, the Glasses editor would 300% not agree. I knew it would be like this. As for my real purpose, Makoto Takahashi squinted at Yoshida, with a very pious look on his face. The cartoonist Aiken Mumen is composed of Landai and Huangmao glasses. Yeah, and the cartoonist Makoto Shinkai composed of the Phoenix Academy Kuma and the Black Flame King. Use comics to decide the winner. This is the scene I long to see. To know this kind of love and killing scene, but it's a passport to enter that world. That world, no wonder Yoshida was confused. After all, in Yoshida's perception, there are only two worlds, life and death. So it's the wisdom of mortals. Makoto Takahashi laughed disdainfully, my companion is a cat. If you haven't reached that level yet, you won't understand it after all. That's right, this is the legendary legend. The Shattered Void. Ahem, just complain appropriately. Dear readers, good night. The weather is cold, please go to bed early. A middle school cartoonist. Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 342. Makoto Takahashi gave that annoying reason. I wonder if Yoshida told the editor, but the day after the serialization meeting ended, Makoto Takahashi received news from Yoshida, confirming that Magic Madoka Shoujo will be serialized on Shonen Jump starting next month. This may be fortunate news for Makoto Takahashi, but for his busy assistant, this is definitely bad news. I actually passed the serialization meeting. After Takahashi Makoto announced the news, Tintin was so surprised that he almost bit his tongue. My dependent Tintin, do you have any dissatisfaction regarding Tintin's exaggerated reaction? Takahashi Makoto squinted his right eye and asked angrily, as a dependent under the Demon King, isn't that what you should do? As Wang's He Jianfeng pointed out, are you willing to fight to the death? Why do you show such a serious expression? Speaking of Cheng, when Pula Magi Madoka Magica starts its weekly serialization, do we have enough time? Ding ding, with dark circles under his eyes, lay weekly on the table, Jingakun still hasn't appeared. Before, Pula Magi Madoka Magica Clannad has already accumulated a lot of manga manuscripts. Once we start a new serialization, we will never be able to complete the manga manuscripts within the deadline. No time? As long as you adjust yourself to non-sleep mode, wouldn't there be enough time? Makoto Takahashi ignored Ding Ding's contemptuous eyes and said to himself, and I wasn't before. Have you already said that there are manga manuscripts about Pula Magi Madoka Magica that are not accessible to those of you who are not practicing enough? So Tintin, you just have to complete the relevant manga within the specified time according to the previous plan. Just draft it? Hey, I get it. Did you think I would say that? Tintin threw the brush on the table, pointed at the station past Jinghe River, and shouted excitedly to Takahashi Makoto, then the comics of Clannad. What should I do with the manuscripts? You must know that the number of comic manuscripts required for monthly serialization is not like that of a weekly magazine, which can be completed just by staying up late a few times. So Chen, if possible, please ask Jinghe-kun to come back quickly. Objection, ahem, Makoto Takahashi is not the scene of Ace Attorney. There is no need to use such brutal skills as slapping the table and releasing intimidation. Now is the critical moment for Lyoza to complete his self-salvation. If this self-salvation treatment process is interrupted now, then Lyoza will no longer be able to be saved from the abyss of darkness. So Tintin, give up the selfishness of human beings. What a stupid idea. The day you become a member of the Demon King, it means you have given up your qualifications as a human being. Okay. But by the way, Chen, are you sure that there is really no problem with your treatment plan? Ding Ding's eyes were a little wandering. He pointed at the comic manuscript on the table, and said with difficulty in a doubtful tone, to be honest, from the beginning, I didn't have any expectations for your plan. Didn't I tell you before? I have a friend who is a psychiatrist and may be able to provide some assistance. Ting Ding, Lyoza is a member of my family. Since there is a problem with the family, then as the master, His Majesty the Demon King, as the ruling class, naturally has to provide assistance at the critical moment. The king has no people, but the people. No king, this is my kingly way. And Makoto Takahashi pulled out a thick stack of Clannad comics from the table. Ding Ding, you seem to underestimate the power of this masterpiece. Right? After the seal is lifted, Lyoza, who has freed his soul from imprisonment, will return to us with a new identity as awakened one. Cheng, ahem, it seems like you said this 5 days ago. But what's the result? Tintin pointed at the empty seats of Ueno Aoi and Mayuri, and complained to Takahashi Makoto with a face full of resentment, if Shizuka-kun doesn't show up again, I guess you need to discuss with Yoshida-kun about the new assistant. Anyway, even I can't help you serialize 3 comics at the same time, even if you stay up late like this. I can give you a definite answer to this. The implication is that even if his assistant defected due to various reasons, Ding Ding still chose to stay. But just as Makoto Takahashi said, Tintin really underestimated the healing power of this masterpiece Clannad. Just as Takahashi Makoto expected, Jing-He finally returned to the Phoenix Academy as an assistant after 6 days of silence. Tintin suddenly felt a little pain in his face. Teacher from the Phoenix Institute, I have finished reading these comic manuscripts, thank you. Jing-He neatly placed the comic manuscripts of Clannad on the table, and in the past few days, I have completed what I need to do. The work is all done. But willfulness often comes with a price, Makoto Takahashi said in an orderly manner while flipping through the manga manuscript. So Ryoko, after the manga Clannad is completed, just leave here. I think you should have realized something, right? Well, yes, a faint smile appeared on Jing-He's face, I think. We'll talk about the future in the future. Don't talk about these useless things now. At least before leaving, I will drain all your value. So, be prepared. Takahashi Chen waved his hand impatiently. Without waiting for Jing-He's answer, he entered work mode again. Because the stage you want to step onto, Ryoko, should be the same as ours. With Shizugawa's return, Ueno Aoi finally understood Takahashi Makoto's painstaking efforts after learning from Shizugawa what Takahashi Makoto had done. Not only did she let go of her previous prejudice against Takahashi Makoto, but she also feeling guilty. I began to transform from tsundere mode to diligence mode, and worked hard with Mayuri to complete the manga manuscript of Dream Eater, although it was only a day's work, but as Takahashi Makoto said, willfulness often comes with a price. Everything is developing in a beautiful direction, although I really want to say this, except for Ding Ding. The 3 people on the assistant side looked at the comic manuscripts piled on the table and really felt that a certain cartoonist who was drawing must have been in his previous life. He is a slave owner, and he is also the kind who likes to exploit and is extremely evil. Thanks to the help of Jing-He River, the serialization needed for the monthly comic Clannad has been completed, so Tintin, who had been worried before, finally breathed a sigh of relief. But Tintin also understands that now is not the time to relax, because starting from next month, Makoto Takahashi will serialize 3 comics at the same time, and the time until this crazy feat begins, the countdown is less than a week away. Clannad, Dream Eater and Pula Magi Madoka Magica, the manga manuscripts of the 3 comics are confirmed to have been received. Yoshida looked at the manga manuscripts on the table and gently wiped the cold sweat on his forehead that was not there at all. Looked at the tired-looking Takahashi Makoto over there with some surprise and sighed, originally I thought you couldn't complete it, Chen, but I really didn't expect. Humph. My beloved cat, don't use mortal standards to measure the arrogant Demon King. Makoto Takahashi leaned on the sofa and gently rubbed his right eye. I forgot to ask that glasses editor before. By the way, my familiar cat, what is the editor's opinion on the manga Pula Magi Madoka Magica? A very inspiring work. Signing a contract with an unknown creature, changing the so-called destiny and life, these settings are very much in the style of shounen comics. Yoshida briefly commented on the newly serialized comic, with a full face. Looking at Makoto Takahashi with admiration, speaking of Chen, I always thought that you were not very good at comics of this style. After all, no matter which comic you have written since your debut, it is more or less, it involves some dark elements, but I didn't expect this time for Pula Magi Madoka Magica. An inspirational work? He. Makoto Takahashi repeated Yoshida's evaluation. He didn't know what he was thinking, but his long-lost ghostly smile appeared on his face. I'm talking about Chen, this Pula Magi Madoka Magica manga. Could it be a trap? Makoto Takahashi's malicious smile gave Yoshida an ominous premonition. Although Takahashi Makoto's abnormal smile before gave Yoshida a very subtle feeling and subconsciously asked, but after asking, Yoshida immediately denied himself. After all, as an editor, I have reviewed a large number of comics. Works similar to the setting in the comic Pula Magi Madoka Magica have also appeared before. Although the subject matter and content are different, for some common settings, the difference is not big. Most of the comics Yoshida had read were as predicted by the editor. They were inspirational works that conveyed positive energy to readers. Therefore, even for a second-level cartoonist like Takahashi Makoto, the comics drawn with such a setting should be similar to the previous comics and not too boring, although Yoshida feels that this idea is quite self-consoling. I mean, but in the first episode of Pula Magi Madoka Magica, the conversations between Madoka and the mysterious creatures really made Yoshida unable to refute. Can people like me really do anything? Can they change this fate? This is a sentence that impressed Yoshida deeply after reading the first chapter of the comic. Madoka, the heroine in the manga, leaves readers with a weak image from the beginning. Human beings will always have complex emotions such as envy, jealousy, longing, and yearning for people who do better than themselves in life. In short, this is a kind of inferiority complex stemming from human nature, but in comics, this kind of inferiority complex in the protagonist can give people a strong sense of empathy, and it can also easily arouse people's resonance. Although he has not seen the following content, Yoshida speculates based on the manga manuscripts he usually reviews, that the content after the manga should be about the heroine Madoka, after signing a contract with a mysterious creature, from helping others, to, in the battle with the unknown enemy, he gradually became stronger. This strength does not only refer to strength, but also the so-called heart. And this kind of witnessing the weak protagonist becoming a powerful being, isn't this the way most teenagers develop into passionate comics? Chen, starting from next week, you have to serialize 3 comics at the same time. Yoshida came back to his senses, looked at Makoto Takahashi who was still smiling strangely, and kindly reminded him, although I don't know your true intention of serializing this comic, but don't do it too hard. Hard work? My beloved cat, I'm sorry you're wrong. On the contrary, I'm super looking forward to it. Takahashi Makoto licked his lips with his tongue. I've been looking forward to that delicious taste that satisfies my soul for a long time. Ha ha ha. Go to bed early, the weather is cold. Good night everyone. Go to bed early, the weather is cold. Good night everyone. Go to bed early, the weather is cold. Good night everyone. Important things should be said 3 times. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. A middle school cartoonist. Author, MaleProtagonist. Male. Chapter 343. Recently, Yashiro Mumanji's status, well, to describe it with an exaggerated word, should be the so-called all goes well, right? Not only did the comic Reversi get the permission to be animated, but everything that happened afterwards developed as expected by the Good Friend group. Although there were a lot of troubles during the selection of voice actors, everything has become a foregone conclusion after the voice actor's sister successfully won the title of the heroine. However, Yashiro Mumanji is not satisfied with this. When the comic is popular, according to the strategy of the editor, it is natural to hope that the comic will continue to be serialized, so as to obtain more benefits. However, Yashiro Mumanji and his good friends did not agree with this approach. Instead, after several nights of negotiations, Landai and Huangmao Glasses made a decision that was contrary to the editor's side. That is, when the result of the Black and White Devil duel appeared in the comic Reversi was also completed. This means that Reversi, which is now more exciting than the previous one, will continue to be serialized in this way until it is completed. Although the decision of Yashiro Mumenjai was opposed by the editors after it was first proposed, the good friends insisted on their own ideas and communicated and negotiated with the editors again and again. Then, after successfully inciting the editor-in-chief Hattori, the good friends seemed to have suddenly exploded their little universe, and with the help of Hattori editor, they successfully convinced the entire editorial side. As for the animation company, after learning about the decision of Yashiro Mumenjai and his good friends at the beginning, they were also somewhat unacceptable. However, Chen Ben, a four-eyed fox who was the decision-maker of the project, personally went to negotiate with Yashiro Mumenjai, and was also dealt with by the two people with gay friends combination skills. Compared with Yashiro Mumenjai, who was going smoothly, Takahashi Makoto and Nizuma Eiji were a little, to use a euphemism, it can barely be regarded as unsatisfactory, right? The results of the serialized manga Pula Meiji Madoka Magica by the new manga artist Makoto Shinkai, except for the first episode that just started serialization, which barely squeezed into the top 3, the subsequent serialized content has been confused and hovering between the 5th and 8th places, although the content of the episode in which the senior sister appeared later once made this manga kill the 4th place, with a slight gap to the 3rd place Dream Eater, but the next week it was directly surpassed by the 2nd place Dream Eater, directly opening a considerable gap. Such results may be a very good result for a new manga artist, but the real author of this manga is the virtual manga artist jointly created by Makoto Takahashi and Eiji Nizuma, Makoto Shinkai. The two manga artists who were called geniuses by the editorial department did not seem to achieve the expected results this time. Aiken, are you sure that this is really a man? After the 2nd episode was serialized and published, the performance dropped directly to the 5th place. When Yoshida came to collect the manga manuscript, he had a little doubt about Makoto Takahashi. The first episode ranked 3rd, and the 2nd episode dropped directly to 5th. Tisk. My beloved cat, this world is so beautiful, but why are you so entangled? Although Takahashi Makoto was too busy to stop painting, he never missed the opportunity to mock Yoshida. If you want to embody the essence of love and healing, a little bit of necessary preparation is natural. Although I want to let my soul enjoy that supreme pleasure as soon as possible, but unfortunately, it's not time to enjoy it now. So now this is our king's strategy. Aiken, are you saying that the real excitement of this comic is at the end? After a short silence, Yoshida asked uncertainly, and according to my understanding of you, the content that makes your soul happy, could it be? My beloved cat, as a member of the organization, you have been in this chaotic world for a long time, you don't even know the death flag of you know too much. Takahashi Makoto squinted his right eye and looked at Yoshida. You know, I have always been very tolerant of people who are about to embark on a journey to that world, so my beloved cat, if you want to ask something else, just ask it without hesitation. Yoshida said silently, knowing that asking will trigger instant death or something. Who the hell is still asking? So the first conversation between the editor and the cartoonist Makoto Shinkai ended in harmony and love. This is inevitable, because the king needs to be humble. When the ranking of the comic dropped again and fell to the 8th place, Takahashi Makoto gave Yoshida this reason, which caused Yoshida to stay awake all night. Haven't you read comics or novels? Aren't the big devils always acting as quiet villains, brewing the supreme plan to return the world to chaos in silence, and then giving the earth a shot at the last moment? This time, before Yoshida opened his mouth, Takahashi Makoto threw the paintbrush on the table and roared angrily, "So my cat, don't disturb me from brewing the sacred plan to destroy the readers. Come quietly and leave quietly, return to dust, and be a human-skinned demon with eyes but no ears and no mouth, isn't it okay?" Chen, I'm just here to collect manga manuscripts, Yoshida's once flustered heart was already numb and tired as the manga reached 4th place and then dropped to 7th place. Anyway, I get all kinds of weird replies every time, so why do I have to masochistically pray to Makoto Takahashi for the truth? This is a new realization that came to Yoshida when he came to collect the manga manuscript for Chapter 7. Shinzuma-kun, this time the ranking of Puella Magi Madoka Magica. Walking cautiously behind Eiji Nozuma, Yujiro held the manga ranking statistics in his hand and whispered at the beginning, and then there was no more. Baiu. Eiji Nizuma, who made this sound, is currently drawing the scene of the senior sisters' battle. In order to better express it through comics, Eiji Nizuma specially turned on the gene lock and used the personality simulation mode based on the character design provided by Makoto Takahashi. I put the manga ranking list on the table, seeing Eiji Nizuma still immersed in the world of fantasy. Yujiro's fighting power dropped sharply, and he picked up the compiled manga manuscripts from the table. Nizuma-kun, I have the manga manuscripts, take it away, okay. At least he was just ignored instead of threatened and ridiculed. Yujiro, who was completely ignored by his new wife Eiji, was treated much better than Yoshida, who suffered various hardships, right? However, the two editors who originally supported the manga artist Makoto Shinkai are now facing the unacceptable results of Puella Magi Madoka Magica and express a lot of pressure. Yoshida has not been sleeping well recently, and the same goes for Yujiro. So, coming to work in the editorial department every morning and watching two editors with panda eyes has gradually become the hottest new activity on the editorial side. Yujiro, how is the progress on your side? An offensive and defensive alliance has been established. No, it is the two editors of the offensive and defensive alliance. They ran into the smoking room and began to exchange information with each other, exchanging information collected from the cartoonists in charge of them. Information. It's not like you don't know Shinzuma-kun's habits. When drawing comics, he doesn't look normal, as if he lives in a different world from us. Yujiro took a long drag on his cigarette and looked at Yoshida with a depressed expression. Speaking of Yoshida, how are you doing there? Yoshida is trying hard to be a noble and cool smoking man. Okay. I already know the situation. Looking at Yoshida's expression, Yujiro smiled awkwardly. Two of the most troublesome weirdos in cartoons are united. Unlucky. I mean, Yujiro, you haven't read Puella Magi Madoka Magica recently, have you? After putting out the cigarette, Yoshida had a strange look on his face. I remember you still have the manga manuscript for the first chapter. There. Is there something wrong? Looking at Yoshida's face, Yujiro was a little confused and asked uncertainly, is it related to the manga manuscript of chapter 7 that you received? I'm just a little confused, I need to compare to know. Yoshida's eyes were a little erratic, and he said to the confused Yujiro, if I'm not mistaken, the next chapter of Puella Magi Madoka Magica, ranking it should go up a lot. Yujiro couldn't calm down. In Aiken Mumengai's studio, two good gay friends were sitting across the table from each other. 7 sample magazines of Shounen Jump were spread out on the table. This arrangement was not to summon someone. The demon god's ritual is not the price that must be paid after activating the ability, but from the first chapter that was just serialized to the 7th chapter that was released today. Landai pointed at the comic sample issue on the table and looked at his good friend seriously. Kairan, now you should have seen it, right? Now, the best, although I don't know much about painting, but pushing up his glasses, the yellow-haired glasses man also showed a serious look on his face. Even if you are as old as me, even laymen can see that the style of comics is gradually changing. No, Akito, it's not just that. Landai shook his head slightly and picked up the sample issue of the first chapter on the table. In the content of the first chapter of Magic Girl Madoka Magica, there are scenes of fighting witches, but also scenes of daily life. Akito, take a closer look. Do you feel that if you eliminate the setting of the two worlds in the manga, it looks like it was painted by two people? The yellow-haired glasses guy knew the meaning after hearing the string. Should I say that he is indeed a good friend? I thought so at the beginning, but... Landai picked up the sample magazine that had just published the 7th chapter. In this chapter, it starts with the Daily World, and later there are also stories about the witch. But Chiren, you see, in this episode, there is no longer that sense of dissonance. So Chiren, what do you think Aiken is thinking? I have read this comic from Chen before, but now it is serialized under the name Shinhaiken, and the content of the first few chapters also deliberately creates for us a sense that the comic is written by the illusion that two people have completed. After the yellow-haired glasses man pondered for a long time, another wry smile appeared on his face. Who knows what the second grader is thinking, but he can be serialized in a monthly magazine at the same time, and are still serializing this in the monthly magazine. Is that guy Aiken really a human? There was a problem with my computer yesterday, and it crashed as soon as I opened the web page. I'm sorry. A middle school cartoonist. Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 344. As you expected, Yoshida, the ranking of the manga has risen a lot. Looking at the latest statistical sheet, Yujiro showed surprise and admiration on his face. However, seeing Yoshida frowning, Yujiro asked in confusion, Yoshida, although this result is not a big deal considering the fame of Mr. Howin and Mr. Nizuma, it is a very good result for a newly debuted manga artist Makoto Shinkai, but you look so gloomy. Is there something wrong? The rise in the ranking of manga is expected, there is nothing surprising about it. Yoshida spread out. I looked at the previously released publications and found the part about the serialization of Puella Magi Madoka Magica. I explained to Yujiro, Yujiro, take a closer look. Does the style of this chapter seem a little different? Especially compared with the first chapter. It seems to be true. Yujiro looked at the publication in his hand carefully and immediately showed a surprised look on his face. If we talk about the content of the first chapter, it is obvious that it was completed by two people in collaboration. The connection between some drawings is not very perfect, but in this chapter, to be honest, I really can't find any faults. So I asked, the topic is right here. Yoshida closed the comic magazine fiercely, and muttered with a deep look on his face, let's not talk about the fact that the two comic styles can gradually merge together. In terms of content, the battle between magical girls and witches, the competition and hostility between magical girls, this seemingly juvenile development model. Yujiro, don't you think that this comic is too ordinary compared to other comics before Chen? It's true. After all, in my impression, the comic style of Mr. Feng Guangai Yuan looks a bit like the style of the Royal Comics on the surface, but in fact, most comics have a comic book with deep connotations and a tendency to evil. Speaking of this matter, Yujiro seemed to recall some painful past, and complained to Yoshida with resentment. The one that impressed me most was Crayon Shin-chan. Although it was only published in the form of short stories, the various joyful comics in the front ended up with such a resentful result. Alas! I feel that this time Puella Magi Madoka Magica may also have the same incident as Crayon Shin-chan. Recalling Takahashi Makoto's previous high evaluation of this new series and the tone of high hopes, Yoshida really felt that he was not in a good mood. I really hope that my premonition is wrong this time. And Takahashi Makoto, the key figure discussed by the two editors, is now discussing the plot of a certain game with a certain uncle. Although multiple endings are indeed a selling point, but... Jingzong Hao Jisang tightly held the game script in his hand and looked at Gao Qiaocheng with a wry smile. Hey, Cheng, how much resentment do you have towards this male protagonist? Even the few good endings are based on the premise that the male protagonist can turn back from the wrong path of a scumbag before they can be achieved. By the way, this male protagonist has been completely shaped by you into a typical scumbag. I can be sure that once the game is made, this scumbag will definitely be a big hit, and you, because of the appearance of those minotaur plots in the middle, you will definitely be cursed by countless players. Tisk. The plot of this game, I responded to you according to your wishes, Jisang. The idea of revenge on society is to summon the evil of this world from that world. Takahashi Makoto used mind reading on Jingzonghao Ji-sang, who was muttering this, with a devilish smile on his face. I want all the lovers in this world to be long-lost siblings. I want a couple who are finally together to betray each other for various reasons. Hey, Ji-sang, I feel it, it comes from your hatred for the world and the hatred for humans. So Ji-sang, is it necessary to argue with me now? Why not work with me to eliminate humans and return the world to chaos? Ha 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 ha. I didn't come to you for this. What was the short silence before? Sure enough, Jingzonghao Ji-sang, have you ever considered how to destroy humans or return the world to chaos? Ah Cheng, I came to you about. Destroying humanity? If you can't even do such a simple thing, Ji-san, I think I should consider the feasibility of cooperating with you to return the world to chaos. Takahashi Cheng took the comic manuscript from the desk and began to draw the comic manuscript of Madoka while talking to Jingzonghao Ji-san. For the sake of our past cooperation, Ji-san, this time I can provide you with assistance without paying the soul. So if you have any questions, please hurry up. Recently, I have to retreat to summon a great cruelty in the human world for a week, so I don't have much time. Sorry to waste your time, Cheng. Jingzonghao Ji-sang did not blame Takahashi Makoto for talking while drawing, but felt a little guilty. After all, Takahashi Makoto's main job is a cartoonist, and writing game scripts is just for, well, according to Takahashi Makoto's explanation, it is for the purpose of helping his awakened peers. Regarding the screenwriter of this game, should the name be Fengguangai Yuan Kuma or Takahashi Makoto, actually, that, I personally do not recommend you to use these two names. After all, the type of this game may have a certain impact on your reputation. Humph, stupid human, always caring about this kind of illusory and boring existence. Originally, Takahashi Makoto was going to insist on using his own name, but seeing the worry and concern in Jingzonghao Ji-sang's eyes, he sighed, stopped the brush, and kept tapping the table with his fingers to enter a state of contemplation. After a long time, Takahashi Makoto stood up and walked straight to the balcony. Ji-san, about this matter, I will make a phone call and consult an expert in this area. Lawyer? Well, that's fine too. Tisk. How could the great demon king Fengguangai Yuan Kuma ask for human help? At this time, of course, I have to find. Takahashi Makoto didn't say who he was looking for, because the call was already connected. It's me. I have an interesting thing to discuss with you. Well, by the way, I came to discuss the timing of the appearance of great cruelty in the next episode. As for the location, in order to prevent my cats and your servants from intruding, this time it is changed to that place. Well, the code name of the operation is Silent Hill, and the code is Promise. Listening to Takahashi Makoto's mysterious call, Jingzonghao Ji-san said that the communication mode of the second year is really unfathomable. To those who know this game, I can only say with regret that you are too pure. Haha. A middle school cartoonist. Author, MaleProtagonist Mao. Chapter 345. 3 days have passed since Takahashi Makoto brought Eiji Niizuma over to discuss the name of the game screenwriter with Kanekaho Yoshi-san. Although Eiji Niizuma was very reluctant to join in at the beginning, he was eventually accepted by Gao Hashi. Hashi Makoto used special skills to successfully persuade. Well, actually the key point is that the new wife Eiji, in the process of being persuaded by Takahashi Makoto, ignited the inner feelings of the King of Black Flame when he was a human. The ghostly soul. Takahashi Makoto also took this opportunity to have a good exchange with his new wife Eiji about the big cruelty incident in the Headless Senpai's witnesses. Hey, Phoenix Academy teacher, when will the game be completed? I'm really looking forward to it. Eiji, the new wife lying on the table, pouted and muttered, and women are so scary. Biology. I didn't expect that based on the options you designed, Teacher Phoenix, the final result I tried would be. So, everyone in the world has the heart of ghosts and beasts. As for those who have not awakened the souls of ghosts and beasts, fundamentally speaking, like you, the king of Black Flame, they lack a leader like me, Makoto Takahashi, putting the manga manuscript of Madoka on the top. A pious light flashed in his right eye. Therefore, in order to awaken the soul deep in human hearts, in order to make human beings realize that their own existence is sinful, I will insist on serializing this comic. King of Black Flame, as a cartoonist, you have become a prophet to guide mankind, leading mankind into an abyss full of despair and darkness. Don't you think it is quite an achievement? Is it a touching thing? Watching the readers jump into the pit one by one and cry and shout, don't you think this is very harmonious and loving? Turning the readers into toys that please our lonely souls, don't you think this is God, or what should the devil do? By the way, Makoto Takahashi, is the God you believe in the God of ghosts and animals? Or is it that the devil he worships is actually the great demon king of ghosts and animals? So from the beginning of Madoka's serialization to the present, the worldview of love and justice has been deliberately created just for the content of this chapter that is about to be serialized. Eiji Naizuma's ability to brainstorm is indeed the same as that of Makoto Takahashi. It also broke through the sky. After listening to Makoto Takahashi's explanation, Eiji Shinzuma had a look of surprise on his face, so no wonder I always feel that this manga is lacking something. Before, I was still wondering why you, Mr. Phoenix Institute, would start drawing this kind of healing comics. It turns out that Phoenix Academy teacher, you did this on purpose to awaken the reader's soul. You are indeed Phoenix Academy teacher. Just like Magikarp is a ferocious beast that can evolve into Gyarados, don't think that Magikarp, who can only use cute skills like Water Splash, is a scumbag. After completing the evolution, it is a cheat in the first generation. The same existence, Takahashi Makoto suddenly let out a sigh that was difficult for Shinzuma Eiji to understand. Seeing the confused look on Eiji's face, Makoto Takahashi didn't explain too much, but turned the topic back to the comics. King of Black Flame, what do you think about the relationship between my beloved cats and cats later? What will your servant's expression be like after reading this manga? Mr. Yoshida will probably clutch the manga manuscript tightly and mutter with a gloomy face, I damn knew this would be like this, Uejiro, because he is an idiot. He will be so frightened that he falls off his chair. By the way, Eiji Naiizuma, do you really have the ability to predict? This is completely a curse, okay. And Eiji Naiizuma, are you really a man when you say this about your own editor? Although Yoshida's situation as the editor-in-chief of Makoto Takahashi is not much better, from this point of view, Yoshida can still sympathize with Yujiro. By the way, the two editors who are on the road talking about the follow-up plot of Madoka, do you have the feeling that there is a sinister wind behind you and that the curse is about to take effect? Hey! It's just as I expected. Makoto Takahashi showed a depressed look on his face, and complained to his new wife Eiji, there is nothing new, so it's boring. But, speaking of the King of Black Flames, you are really sharp. You were able to guess the plot direction of this episode from that line. Can you be said to be my ally? Actually, it was because in Higurashi before, Rika-chan also said the same words, but the result was that the group was destroyed. I remembered those words deeply, so this time I saw my senior say the same words. After that, I knew the ending would be like this. Eiji Naiizuma looked at the manga manuscript of Madoka on the top, with a hint of curiosity on his face. Speaking of Phoenix Academy, you must have seen it in Yoshida and Yujiro. Will this chapter be serialized smoothly after that? It is precisely to prevent these unexpected factors that I deliberately delayed the submission of the manuscript until today. Makoto Takahashi slapped his new wife Eiji on the shoulder hard, with a comforting smile on his face. I don't like this kind of thing. I've done it many times, so what's more, there's nothing to be afraid of anymore, because I'm not alone anymore. In Madoka, when the senior sister learned that Madoka wanted to fight alongside her, she felt that her years of loneliness and fear were all dispelled. Therefore, before challenging the witch alone, she held Madoka's hand and excitedly he said, "There is nothing to be afraid of anymore," successfully set the death flag, and easily eliminated the soldiers pretending to be the witch. Unfortunately, due to underestimating the enemy, the witch Charlotte dived and bit her head off, and successfully completed the task. The alternative evolution of Big Brutal from Senior to Headless Senpai. In the past year, in the All Killings chapter of the manga Higurashi, Rika Furut also said the same words. Although it temporarily boosted the atmosphere and combat effectiveness of the small team, the result was the same because of this magical curse. And finally successfully completed the mission of stop the team and destroy it before victory. But now I heard that Makoto Takahashi actually said the same thing without thinking about life and death, so he was very worried about the possibility of serialization of this episode of Madoka. Eiji Niizuma was very worried, and he was not feeling well. When the two editors arrived, the two bastard guys on the cartoonist side immediately stopped communicating with each other in a tacit understanding, with expectant looks on their faces, and carefully observed the expressions of the two editors opposite. Niizuma Eiji simply wanted to verify whether his precognition, no, his curse ability was fulfilled, while Takahashi Makoto, on the other hand, wanted to make his soul happy through the reactions of the two editors on the editorial side. Although compared to the large number of readers, the pleasure generated by the interesting reactions of just two editors is like a drop in the ocean, but, no matter how small a mosquito is, it is still flesh. Hey! Tomo Mami's fighting style is quite interesting. Yoshida became excited when he saw the senior sister's performance-like fighting style in the comics. Although Tomo Mami's battles have also appeared in previous comics, but every time it's the final blow, this is the first time that Tomo Mami's fighting style has been drawn in detail in a comic, and it looks quite gorgeous. That's true. I originally thought that as a magical girl, the way of fighting is to use magic, but this setting has been changed in Madoka. The weapons used by Tomo Mami are guns. Yujiro turned over looking at the comic manuscript. He carried it without hesitation. When bowing like a lady, a gun emerged from the skirt. The battle with the witch, no, it is not so much a battle, but it is better to say that it is a lady. There is a gorgeous performance on the stage. It seems that my familiar cat didn't notice it. Takahashi Makoto turned his head and whispered to his new wife Eiji. Yujiro didn't notice either. It seems that the idiot is really an idiot. He usually doesn't read the comics carefully. Eiji Niizuma also communicated with Takahashi Makoto in a low voice, but listening to the content of their discussion, it should be close. There are still 2 pages of manga manuscripts. Makoto Takahashi put aside the manga manuscripts in the hands of the 2 editors and made a gesture of "I'm cheating and I'm proud" towards Eiji Shinzuma. In order to achieve the best effect before, I put that comic page at the end, which is the end of this chapter. Phoenix Academy teacher, good job. For new cartoonists, perhaps the editor will read the cartoon roughly once, then read it a second time from the beginning, and communicate with the author at the same time. However, for cartoonists like Takahashi Makoto and Niizuma Eiji, there is no need to follow this process. It has become a habit of the 2 editors Yoshida and Yujiro to discuss the content of the comics while reading them. Damn it! What's going on? How could it be? After seeing his senior sister being killed by a witch dive head bite, the expression on Yoshida's face became quite exciting. When Yoshida looked up and saw the weird smile on Makoto Takahashi's face, he decisively put down the comic manuscript, covered his face and shouted resentfully, "I damn sure knew this would be like this, I knew." Bang! Yujiro even used a chair to complete a difficult and painful falling position. Oh my, it's true. After watching the 2 editors behave like he was cursed, Eiji Niizuma laughed with satisfaction. According to the Phoenix Academy teacher, all of this is indeed. Well, This is the choice of Steins Gate. Makoto Takahashi looked at Yoshida's depressed look, and cooperated very cooperatively to pick up what his new wife Ag had not finished. At the same time, he also included two editors, who was full of arrogance. The second grader laughed, "The performance by the two of you is really wonderful. Ha 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 ha. Well, this is a double update. Everyone, please go to bed early. It's cold. Please take care of your health. Don't be like a certain cat who has to go to war with the virus girl. Good night, meow." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. A middle school cartoonist. Author, MaleProtagonist Mao. Chapter 346. When Pula Magi Madoka Magica was first serialized, Yoshida and Yujiro, the editors, and even Pingze, who was called the Glasses editor by Makoto Takahashi, thought that this comic was full of inspiration and healing. Although the names of witches and magical girls sound similar, the settings in the comics belong to hostile camps. If magical girls are born from the realization of wishes, witches are born from curses. Magical girls bring hope, and on the contrary, witches bring despair. Uneasy and suspicious, anger and hatred, the existence of witches will bring these seeds of disasters to the world, causing humans to die from various accidents, and the main responsibility of magical girls is to fight witches constantly and protect humans from evil witches. And this setting is usually the typical style of mainstream comics. So, I have to say that for Shonen Jump, which focuses on this theme, Pula Magi Madoka Magica is indeed a highly compatible comic. But this is only until today. Aiken, what's going on? Please forgive Yoshida's brief silence before he spoke, because the content of the 8th episode of Madoka Madoka was too shocking for Yoshida. Didn't you see that Yoshida tried his best to suppress his trembling voice when he spoke? Mommy Tomo just died like that. That's a given. Takahashi Makoto looked down on Yoshida. Speaking of which, my cat, have you ever seen a human being who survived after having his head bitten off? And in the comics, the senior was killed by the witch with a trick like dive and bite. Or, my cat, you don't think magical girls are invincible, do you? Even in the comics, the witch side must be eliminated, but who stipulates that the witch side can't kill the magical girl? If you want to kill someone, you must be prepared to be killed. Isn't this common sense in the world? I know what you said, but... Although Takahashi Makoto was right and Yoshida felt speechless, the problem was. Speaking of which, Makoto, this is from the comics. In the worldview of the comics, does justice have to defeat evil? Humph. Ridiculous and childish remarks. Takahashi Makoto showed disdain on his face. Sneer, eyes kept wandering between Yoshida and Yujiro. Just through the eyes, he suppressed the intention of the two to open their mouths to defend themselves. As cartoonists, we are the heaven, the earth, the controller of the world, and the god of the whole world for all existences in the cartoons. In our eyes, witches and magical girls are just different kinds of ants. There is no so-called justice and evil. For us, there is no difference between witches and magical girls, they are just straw dogs. Do you need to care so much? If you really have tangled emotions because of this, then I can only say that you are just mortals after all. Even if you have the opportunity to become a god in the future, after all, you will only be a pseudo-god who has lost the godhood. But Mr. Feng Guangai Yuan, if this episode directly kills the character of the senior sister. Yujiro saw that Yoshida had been suppressed by a certain Chuyunibu. As an editor on the same side, he naturally would not stand idly by and immediately intervened in this war. This is really too sudden. Isn't the content of the first few chapters of this comic a very healing story? But now, it has become a depressing story. Tisk. My cats and servants of the Black Flame King, it seems that you have a one-sided understanding of the so-called love and healing. Takahashi Makoto snatched the comic manuscript from Yoshida's hand and handed it to the best listener Nazuma Eiji on the side. It seems that it is time to give you some special education similar to spiritual counseling. How about starting with the so-called love and healing? Ahem, heaven and earth are not benevolent, and treat all things as straw dogs. Saints are not benevolent, and treat. Originally, according to the plan of the two editors on the editing side, when they came to collect the comic manuscript today, they would tell Takahashi Makoto and Nazuma Eiji about the good news of the 7th chapter's ranking increase, but the two editors had just sat down and had not had time to convey their goodwill to the two problematic cartoonists on the cartoonist side, and they were stimulated by the plot of the Headless Senior Sisters Observations branch in Madoka Madoka. Then, Takahashi Makoto started his brutal spiritual counseling. There is nothing surprising about instilling one's own worldview and values into others. After all, communication between people is actually indirect, instilling one's own cognition and understanding of the world into others, but the problem is that Takahashi Makoto's worldview and values are quite abnormal. If Takahashi Makoto, as a cartoonist, talked to the two miserable editors on the editorial side about his original intention of creating comics, discussed the significance of the existence of comic characters, and pointed out the profound connotations that comics want to express. These topics, although the cartoonist's own understanding is definitely different from the editorial side, are still within the scope of everyone can still communicate happily, and the two miserable editors will naturally express feelings such as although they may not be accepted, they are still very valuable for reference. However, now Takahashi Makoto is instilling some strange knowledge into the two editors, such as understanding the great way of heaven from God's perspective, how to deepen your understanding of the Tao, and how to ascend to heaven in broad daylight. Such immature viewpoints have exceeded the understanding of the two editors on the editorial side. So after Takahashi Makoto used a high-level mental oppression, the two editors, who were physically and mentally devastated, fled with the comic manuscripts. They didn't even have the courage to suggest changing the content of the comics before serialization. Is this, all right? Nazuma Eiji looked at the two editors who quickly evacuated with the comic manuscripts, and asked Takahashi Makoto uncertainly, "Teacher Howin, does this mean that the content of the 8th episode of Madoka Xiao will be serialized in the next issue of Shonen Jump? So King of Black Flame, do you understand now? Your previous worries were unnecessary." Takahashi Makoto looked at Nazuma Eiji, who was a little dazed, and showed a smug smile on his face. "Although it took a few minutes longer than I expected, the result is still the same. Even if it has been even the commander who changed the department couldn't stop me. Because I'm the crazy manga artist, Fengguanjin Kuma. Ha 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 ha. Oh. As expected of Fengguanjin teacher, speaking of Nizuma Eiji-san, has anyone ever told you that when you have little stars in your eyes and show admiration, it's really cute? When the new issue of Shonen Jump with the content of the 8th episode of Madoka was released, Yoshida and Yujiro both had a wry smile on their faces compared to their colleagues who couldn't wait to read the comic magazine. If it weren't for the editorial side's regulations that all editorial staff must stay in the office on the day the new issue of the publication is released, Yoshida and Yujiro would have escaped long ago with the excuse of negotiating comics with cartoonists. I say, Yoshida-kun, we may be scolded to death by readers, right? Just in this scene, the hand that lit the cigarette began to tremble. Yujiro, you are really not good. Not a possibility, but a certainty. As a person who has experienced this several times, Yoshida was not much better than Yujiro this time. Although Yoshida looked calm, his pale face betrayed his panic. But Yujiro, after you went back, did you read the content of this episode carefully? Well, the part where Tomomomi was killed at the end, I read it over and over again. Huh? No, after reading it for the first time, I felt quite depressed, but Yoshida actually read it over and over again. Yujiro looked at Yoshida in surprise, and never expected that Yoshida would have such a special hobby. However, Yujiro did not complain about it, but just distanced himself from Yoshida without leaving any trace. Yes, is there any problem? I found that we thought too simply at the beginning. Yoshida did not care about Yujiro's behavior, but took a deep puff of cigarette, with a look of regret on his face. Aiken has said many times that he believes in the rule of equivalent exchange, and his comics are the same. Think about it carefully, basically all of Aiken's comics involve this rule more or less. Originally, I thought Madoka would be an exception. Is that so? Yujiro has confirmed that Yoshida has been brainwashed by Makoto Takahashi, and his normal worldview has collapsed. Yoshida actually used Makoto Takahashi's way of thinking to interpret this episode of Madoka, which should be the best proof. As the price to get the chance to make any wish come true, is it just to become a magical girl and fight witches? Yoshida fiercely put out his cigarette, looked up at Yujiro who looked alert, and said seriously, Aiken, that guy, actually hinted at the direction of this comic from the beginning. So, Yujiro, Yoshida, are you still in the mood to chat now? Aida suddenly turned on the roaring mode and intervened in the conversation forcefully. Now the editorial department's phone is about to explode, all about the plot of Madoka. You guys come out and help appease the readers. Sure enough. Yoshida and Yujiro smiled bitterly at each other, and raised their hands to cover their faces at the same time. I knew it would be like this. Speaking of Yoshida and Yujiro, although you haven't rehearsed, your actions are exactly the same. Sure enough, you are going to become the gay successors of the neighbors of Yagi Mumanjai. A middle school cartoonist. Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 347. According to Yoshida's prediction, Shonen Jump, which contains the devastating 8th episode of Madoka, which is the part where the senpai suffers a dive head bite, was released this morning. Readers will have to start from being tricked. He came back to his senses in the killing rhythm, and then called the editorial department to use roar and roar or something. It would not show up until at least the afternoon or even tomorrow, and by that time, Yoshida and Yujiro had already made excuses to talk to the cartoonist. Discussing comics-related matters, we escaped from the editorial department. Although the plan was very good, Yoshida and Yujiro never expected that less than an hour after this issue of Shonen Jump was released, the editorial department would suffer from readers' anger. If the first call that came in was just a coincidence, then in the following time, the rhythm of phone calls full of angry complaints could not stop, making several people on the editorial side clearly realize that something was wrong. And the source of this aberration, without any surprise, can be determined to be from the newly published 8th episode of Madoka. If eyes could kill, Yoshida and Yujiro, who were smiling awkwardly, would have died many times. Colleagues on the editorial side really wanted to complain about these two disaster editors, but the calls one after another took up the time for all the editorial staff to complain, leaving the editors too tired to deal with the problem and had no time to find Yoshida and Yoshida. Yujiro's trouble, and everyone on the editorial side also knows that this is just the beginning. As time goes by, more and more readers will see the content of this article, and then the number of calls will also increase, eventually forming a phone storm that once again attacks the editorial department, talking about this long-lost disaster, but it made the editor, who was in tears, have an inexplicably similar sense of sight. For readers of Shonen Jump, today is also a day destined to be tricked, and the reason, naturally comes from Madoka. When Madoka began to be serialized, the editors unanimously believed that it was a healing comic. As the editors in charge of comics, Yoshida and Yujiro, their knowledge of the comic Madoka was only less than that of others. There are a little more cartoonists, and Makoto Takahashi has confessed to Yoshida several times that Madoka will be a healing masterpiece, which relies on making readers understand the true meaning of healing and love, that kind of. So, after listening to the self-evaluation of a certain Chuyuni mangaka who had problems with his expressions, and with the instigation of Yoshida and Yujiro, the editor printed something like "This is a healing work introduction." Moreover, Takahashi Makoto and Nyaizuma Eiji, two mangakas who have awakened the ghost soul, wrote something like reviews and recommendations. I have to say that such an evaluation does have a fatal temptation for human beings who have gradually lost their hope and longing in this increasingly complex and realistic society. At least Ogawa Kaed is like this. Although it is a manga that claims to be healing, the plot development of contracting to become a magical girl and fighting a witch seems too young, right? Regarding the new serialization of Madoka, Ogawa Kaed finished reading it. After the content of the previous 3 chapters, this evaluation was given. But Xian Hiken, I've never heard of him before. He should be a newly debuted cartoonist, right? Some time ago, with the serialization of the comic Dream Eater, many readers were infected by the protagonist in the comic, Ahomumenha, so under the passionate impulse, just like the protagonist in the comic, they tried to complete the manga and submit it to Shonen Jump. Although most people are just passionate and want to become a cartoonist for only 3 minutes, and in the end they do not stick to it, but there are indeed some works that have successfully entered the editor's attention and been published in the form of short stories in Shonen Jump Superior. As for long-form serialization in the form of serialization, there are also visual inspections, but most of them were cut in half by the editor because of poor performance in the later stage. Therefore, Ogawa Kaed does not have too many expectations for this new serial Madoka by newcomer manga artist Shinkai Makoto, because it is only serialized for 8 chapters, and maybe this may be the last chapter. Ogawa Kaed, as a person who has escaped from low-level taste, as a person who has escaped from, well, in short, most of the comics that Ogawa Kaed likes are the kind of comics that can make people think deeply and have insights after reading them. For example, the Phoenix Institute's Fierce DN, such as the Phoenix Institute's Fierce Full Steel, and another example is the reverse with the Jumumenha's current extremely ferocious combat power, but the previous series of Madoka there is no profound connotation in the few chapters, and there are not many serious themes. Instead, as previously promoted by the editor, it is full of healing fun. If you eat a lot of meat and fish every day, you will eventually get tired of it. Occasionally, you may get unexpected surprises if you eat a simple vegetarian meal. You often read some thought-provoking and confusing comics. People will become not so good, so the comic Madoka is indeed a good choice for Ogawa Kaed as a tune-up. At least the healing comics can make people cute after reading them. No, visual inspection it seems that there is no such advanced and effective function. Of course, the premise of all this is before the content of the 8th episode of Madoka is published. But after these words came out, by the way, Makoto Takahashi is very much looking forward to the reader's actions driven by resentment. After all, this is related to the increase in the happiness of the soul. The comic Madoka has been serialized so far. What Ogawa Kaed and most readers are most curious about is naturally the inner desires of 2 girls who have not yet signed a contract to become magical girls. The girls who have signed a contract to become magical girls, what kind of wishes did they exchange when they signed a contract with Kyubei? In the previous comics, Kyubei once told Madoka that what she can get by signing a contract to become a magical girl is to realize an impossible wish in life. Although there have been 2 magical girls in the comics, Homu, no, it's the straight black Akatsuki Homura and the double curly ponytail Asami Tomo, but these 2 were magical girls at the beginning of the comics. The identity appeared, but it was not revealed what kind of wish the 2 people had realized. They signed a contract with Kyubei and became magical girls. The content of the 8th episode published this time is directly through the memories released by the senior, allowing readers like Ogawa Kaed to understand why the senior became a magical girl. My situation is, I don't even have room to think about it. But I don't regret it, and I think the lifestyle is much better than dying there. But, for those who still have choices, I hope they still take it seriously. Think about it before making a decision, because this is what I failed to do. Although the comic did not tell what the senior sister's wish was, in the comic, when the senior sister was covered in scars, lying in the car at the scene of the car accident, and struggling to reach out to Kyubei, who suddenly appeared with her hands, Ogawa Fen immediately understood the bitterness and helplessness in the senior sister's heart when she said these words. The reason why the senior sister signed a contract and changed her job to a magical girl was just to survive. Just to survive. Afterwards, the content of the comic is that the senior schoolmate, as a senior, tells the two selected girls about the mission of the magical girl, as well as the precautions when signing a contract with Kyubei. Of course, when looking at these contents, what concerned Ogawa Kaed the most was about Homura Akatsuki, the first and most mysterious magical girl to appear. Although Madoka has been serialized for 8 chapters, Ogawa Kaed has never understood why the magical girl named Xiaomi Homura is quite hostile to Kyubei, the creature who signed the contract, and even attempted to chasing that cute-looking mysterious creature. However, according to Kaed Ogawa's observation, the content of the 8th episode of Madoka should focus on the situation on the senior sister's side. Xiaomi Homura probably has no chance to appear. Although I am a little resentful about Xiaomi Homura not appearing, the next development of the comic makes Ogawa Kaed a little worried. In the manga, Sayaka Miki failed to visit her childhood sweetheart Kyosuke Jojo, and when she and Madoka were about to leave in depression, they discovered that a witch's seed appeared near the hospital. Because she missed her childhood sweetheart who was lying in the hospital bed, Sayaka decided to let Madoka go find her senior sister, while she took Kyubei into the witch's barrier to monitor the witch who had not yet fully hatched. Seeing the temporary combination of energy complaining girl Sayaka and cute pet Kyubei fearlessly breaking into the witch's barrier, Ogawa Kaed had an ominous premonition. Because according to the plot routines commonly used in many comic novels, Sayaka Miki, as a non-protagonist, can easily face the situation without the assistance of the protagonist's halo. Nervously flipping through the manga manuscript, Ogawa Kaed finally breathed a sigh of relief after seeing her senior and Madoka arriving in time. But then I saw that the senior who had entered the witch barrier did not rush to join Miki Sayaka immediately, but had a conflict with Akatsuki Homura who was following. Just after letting go, she came again get nervous. Originally, Ogawa Kaed thought that the next development of the manga would be that the senior sister would have a fierce fight with Xiaomi Homura, which would delay the rescue of Sayaka, leading to Sayaka's death, but senior sister actually controlled Xiaomian like this. Looking at the comics, senior sister directly controlled Xiaomian with a ribbon, and quickly went to rescue Sayaka. Ogawa Kaed was surprised, and her face he showed a satisfied smile and said, "It is indeed a healing comic. The senior is the senior, and she has not forgotten her main purpose. It's great that no accidents occurred." The next plot is the exchange between the senior and Madoka on the road. Although I don't know why the cartoonist spent a lot of ink on this, seeing Madoka and her senior talking while walking made Ogawa Kaed worried, and she wanted to run into the comics and stop the communication between the two. Although he wanted to skip this part of the plot, Ogawa Kaed still read all the dialogues patiently, and after reading the dialogue between the senior sister and Madoka, Ogawa Kaed was very glad that she did not skip this part. And also gained a new understanding of senior sister. Although the senpai signed a contract with Kyubei, changed jobs and became a magical girl, and was exempted from death in a car accident, however, recalling the content of the previous serialization, the senpai lived alone in an empty apartment without her parents. Sitting alone in the middle of the classroom, with no classmates around her to communicate with, talking quietly to Madoka and Sayaka alone, far away from all the classmates around her. I'm not someone worth admiring. I'm just pretending to be strong. Even if I'm afraid or sad, I can't tell others. I can only cry alone. Can you really fight with me in the future? Can you always be by my side? Therefore, when I saw in the comics, when Madoka proposed to fight as a magical girl with the senior who had always been handsome and strong, the senior who had always guided Madoka and Sayaka as a senior, suddenly revealed her fragile and lonely side. She held Madoka's hands tightly with tears in her eyes and said these words. Ogawa Feng suddenly felt a little uncomfortable in her heart. My body feels so light. This is the first time I fight with such a happy mood. There is nothing to be afraid of anymore, because I am no longer alone, because the knot in her heart was untied. The senior showed almost unstoppable abilities when destroying the witch's familiars and witches. The gorgeous battle process made Ogawa Feng, who observed the comics, exclaimed with excitement. Not every reader has the brutal intuition like Eiji Niizuma, so Xiao Chuanfeng did not notice that the senior sister had already set an inevitable death flag in one of his previous lines. The so-called strength is not just because of having strong strength, but also a strong heart. After watching the senior sister kill the witch with a classic special move in the comic, Xiao Chuanfeng nodded with satisfaction and praised generously. It is indeed a comic called Healing. After reading it, I feel much happier. Speaking of which, when I saw the pit-digging devil Feng Guangai Yuan Kuma recommend this comic, I thought this comic was similar to the devil's comic type, both of which were the kind of comics that pit people to death without compensation. I didn't expect. Xiao Chuanfeng slowly flipped through the comic manuscript, but he laughed at himself. I didn't expect this comic to be really healing. When I saw the senior sister alone before, I felt a little uncomfortable, but now. Just when Xiao Chuanfeng was still mocking himself for wronging Feng Guangai Yuan Kuma, the development of the comic took a magical turn. The witch named Charlotte was not killed by the senior, but a huge figure jumped out from the doll-like body, and before the senior could react, he unceremoniously performed the dive and bite head kill and bit off the senior's head. This was the last page that Xiao Chuanfeng had just opened, and it was also the end of the 8th chapter of the comic. Xiao Chuanfeng, whose smile had not yet faded, was stunned when he saw this extremely brutal scene in the comic. After a long time, Xiao Chuanfeng reacted and confirmed that he had not seen it wrong. Then he showed a broken smile on his face. Healing, healing. Shinkai Makoto, that evil author, and Feng Guangai Yuan Kuma, that pit-digging devil, this is not called healing, it's clearly depression, bastard. Ahem, something happened at home yesterday, and a certain cat was in a bad mood and wanted to switch to the killer mode. So there was no update. Sorry to say. Of course, the main reason is not this, but that I had no time to write yesterday. Humans, because of emotional entanglements, not just love, will eventually enter destruction. It seems that if this continues, a certain cat will go to find the polluted Holy Grail. Becoming a partner of justice is said to be a good choice. Well, and it has started snowing outside the barrier where a certain cat lives today, so a friendly reminder, everyone, please keep warm and go to bed early at night. A middle school cartoonist. Author, MaleProtagonist Mao. Chapter 348. Although the process may make people feel sad or depressing, Madoka is indeed a healing manga, there is no doubt about it. Whether it was the decapitation of the senior sister, or the subsequent love-killing between Kyoko and Sayaka, or the infinite reincarnation started by Xiaomi Homura, all of this was just to hide, and in the end Madoka completed the magic. The redemption of girls only expresses the theme of love and healing. For readers who are not aware of this, their understanding of comics will naturally remain on the surface, limited only to the storyline shown in the comics. However, the manga has only now been serialized to the part of the Headless Senpai's observations. As for the love and healing that Makoto Shinkai wants to express, the readers can't understand it, and even the editor can reveal it. People who perceive the essence through phenomena have not yet appeared through visual inspection. For example, Yoshida has heard from Takahashi Makoto many times that Madoka is definitely a healing manga. After the brutal 8th chapter of Madoka was published, after experiencing the baptism of angry roar from readers, and after being criticized by colleagues with complaining tones and hateful eyes for 3 full days, I was exhausted physically and mentally. Yoshida, who was scrolling, and Yujiro, who was in the same state, set out from their base camp on the editorial side to find to find the true identity of the cartoonist Makoto Shinkai, to find an explanation that could heal the psychological trauma, or maybe it's an excuse to calm down the anger on the readers' and editors' sides. So as I said before, Madoka is undoubtedly a healing manga. Looking at Yoshida's constipated face, Takahashi Makoto calmly drew the manga manuscript in an orderly manner. He said, "My beloved is a cat. It seems that you are still not clear about the true meaning of the name Xian Hiken, as a being who carries the legacy of the Phoenix Academy's fierceness and the King of Black Flame. Xian Hiken is there's another nickname for that. I am now discussing with you about the plot about the senior sister in the manga Madoka." Yoshida was going crazy. He wanted to grab Takahashi Makoto by the collar and use roar in the face, this extremely unhygienic killing move, but after considering Takahashi Makoto's incredible force value, Yoshida decisively stopped this suicidal idea and behavior, and used it angrily on Takahashi Makoto. "A roar that looks quite powerful. Chen, you said before that this is a healing comic, right? But look at the plot you have created now, this is also called healing. Is it? It's completely depressing. It is meaningless to gain lessons that are not accompanied by pain. The so-called healing, birth and foundation must first endure pain and despair. If you have not experienced real pain and despair, how can you have the so-called warm heart? What about the happiness cure?" Makoto Takahashi laughed disdainfully, seeming to be laughing at Yoshida's naive understanding. "My dependent cat, if you still don't understand, let me give you a simple example. When you are very hungry, even a steamed bun is an extremely delicious delicacy for you. In the same way, humans who have not struggled in darkness and despair will never learn to be satisfied. And also will never understand that the so-called calm and boring daily life in reality is actually a kind of real happiness in a sense, and this is the true meaning of healing that I want to convey. Even if you say that, I understand. Although serious nonsense is the area that junior high school students are good at, this time Yoshida was not fooled as usual, but looked at Makoto Takahashi seriously. Asked firmly with a suspicious tone, "But Chen, are you sure that the manga Madoka Unagi Shinzuma drew, is not used to trick readers and gain spiritual pleasure from it?" Looking at Yoshida in surprise, Takahashi Makoto paused with the paintbrush in his hand. An innocent smile appeared on his face, and blinked at Yoshida. "My beloved cat, you are too worried. I look like that a person who is full of ghostly aura and has a bad taste in torturing others for pleasure. It's not a question of resemblance." Seeing that Makoto Takahashi not only pretended to be innocent, but also acted shamefully cute, Yoshida laughed angrily. "Actually, you are just such a person, okay? Stupid my familiar cat, it seems that you have been blinded by the so-called hatred and anger. Can you not feel the true meaning of love and healing from the comics and obtain salvation?" Makoto Takahashi looked at Yoshida's furious look, shook his head slightly with deep regret. "But a real man. Let alone a stupid cat belonging to me, even humans who hurt each other can finally feel the so-called love and love from this comic. Healing, after all, my beloved cat, you have to know that there is an existence named Shinkai Makoto, but there is a title called Warrior of Love that is born with a healing aura, and the effect is quite powerful, not to mention." "Stop talking. Chen, please stop talking." Yoshida looked at Makoto Takahashi, who was hesitant to speak. Unusually, he suppressed the curiosity that comes with being a cat's dependent, and looked at Gao Chiao with a pleading look. "Chiao Chen, I know what you are going to say next must be related to the name Xian Hiken, but I have an ominous feeling. Let's talk about comics." Objection. I refuse to agree with this cowardly and humble excuse for evasion. When facing difficulties and setbacks, fighting to pieces is the choice of a real man. Makoto Takahashi looked at Yoshida with contempt, his tone slightly he sighed with regret. "I think that a certain Jisang almost collapsed after triggering the Minotaur incident. However, with the help of the fierce demon king of the Phoenix Academy, that Jisang finally realized the cruelty of reality, and from then on he broke out of the abyss of darkness and despair, carrying resentment against mankind. And a curse on the world, because he vowed to retaliate against the entire human race and return the world to chaos, he cooperated with us. What we are discussing now is comics. Yoshida, can your weak voice interrupt Takahashi Makoto, who is full of rage in the second class? It can't be done at all. So my beloved cat, are you sure you don't want to hear our next plan? Seeing Yoshida's helpless expression, Takahashi Makoto showed a strange smile on his face. In that case, what you said before, as if I didn't say anything, and everything that happened after that, ahihi. This is considered a threat, right? If he really doesn't listen to Takahashi Makoto's plan, Yoshida can completely imagine that in the future, not to mention himself, even the entire editorial department will be screwed by this second-tier cartoonist in front of him. Ahem, it's not too bad to be too bad. After all, as an organization that has been fighting with us for many years, there are also strong-willed people on the editorial side. At most, it is just to turn on Honkai mode. Makoto Takahashi didn't even need to turn on mind reading or mental control. You can understand what the helpless Yoshida is thinking. And my companion is a cat. At this time, you must not try to start from the King of Black Flame. Although we are from the same camp, the King of Black Flame is only interested in our plan to destroy the world. I just know a little bit. In a sense, the existence value of the Black Flame King is to get rid of stupid people like you who have an excessive sense of justice. Is the value of existence used as a shield to hide others? If Eiji Nyaizuma hears this comment, he will cry. He will definitely cry. What I want to know now is about the next development of the manga Madoka. Yoshida was deeply touched by Takahashi Makoto's peak ability when he changed the subject. If he continues to let it go, maybe Makoto Takahashi can change the topic from comics to the origin of human beings. Senior's plot, now that it has been published, and, then in the following plot, similar situations should not happen again, right? The reason why Yoshida suddenly made a strange coughing sound was naturally because he remembered the question about this episode of Madoka. Contrary to the expectations of Yoshida, Yojiro, and even the entire editor, the 8th episode of Madoka about the Headless Senpai's insights appears. Although it has been complained by readers, according to the latest statistical results, look, the content of this chapter actually made the manga rise to second place. In terms of ranking, manga artist Makoto Shinkai's Madoka even surpassed Zombie Gun and Zombie Gun by Eiji Arizuma. Dream Eater by Makoto Takahashi is only ranked below Reversi by Ajuma Menha. Of course, Yoshida would not go to trouble to tell Takahashi Makoto about this result. Although Makoto Takahashi usually shows that he doesn't care at all about the rankings and results of comics, but this time the situation is different. Makoto Takahashi may not care about the previous comics, but the 8th chapter of Madoka serialized this time, according to Yoshida's understanding of a certain middle school student. After learning about this ranking, Makoto Takahashi visually judged he will do even more crazy things next. After all, this comic is meant to trick readers into gaining pleasure, excerpted from a quote from a middle-grade cartoonist. The dive and bite kill similar to the death method of Senior Sister is no longer available, but the blackening and collapse movement has begun, so stay tuned. After staring at Yoshida for a long time, Takahashi Makoto's face showed with a strange smile. He tapped the comic manuscript on the table with his fingers. There is also my familiar cat. We will use the name of Makoto Shinkai to reconstruct readers' understanding of the world. You have to know, this it will be an epic making feat. Seeing Makoto Takahashi entering the frenzy mode, Yoshida really felt that coming to see Makoto Takahashi today might be a stupid and wrong choice. That's right, I want to distort humankind's understanding of the world through comics and reshape humankind's normal understanding of the world. From now on, when it comes to school romance comics, readers will immediately think of Clannad. When it comes to magical girls fighting against evil, readers will the first thing I thought of was the beheaded senior, Homura, Madoka, and Mahashaku. Makoto Takahashi looked at a certain Jisang who had just entered the door, with a more joyful smile on his face, and turned around. He turned his head to Yoshida and declared loudly and proudly, "When it comes to scum, the first thing that humans in the world will think of from now on will definitely be the scumbag under a certain hatchet." Well, did I open it the wrong way? Looking at the strange situation at the scene, Jingzonghao Jisang scratched his head with a confused look on his face. Why does my intuition tell me, now seems to be the wrong time to debut? Jisang, it's not you who's wrong. Takahashi Cheng stood up and patted Jingzonghao's shoulder comfortingly. It's the world that's wrong. Takahashi Makoto's words seemed to have opened Pandora's box, making Jingzonghao Jisang's body tremble constantly, and the corners of his mouth twitched crazily. It took him a while to come back to his senses, and he pushed Takahashi Makoto's hand away with some difficulty. Took out a wrapped box from his arms and handed it to Takahashi Makoto. "Yai-san, it's rare that my companion cat is here, don't you think?" Makoto Takahashi handed over the game unceremoniously, with a strange smile on his face. As a member of the editorial side, let my companion cat, isn't it the choice of Steins Gate to have an unforgettable experience? And it is our unshirkable responsibility to spread the true meaning of love and healing. Really, do you really want to give it? Looking at Yoshida's confused look, Jingzonghao Jisang swallowed hard. Well, Cheng, don't you think, Mr. Yoshida has played with this? After the game, I will definitely have a good chat about life with you. Eh? What kind of game is this? Is it the latest one? Yoshida looked at the mysterious two people in confusion. His curiosity could no longer be suppressed, and he reached out to the game in Makoto Takahashi's hand. Although he was a little confused, Takahashi Makoto did not stop his behavior, but Yoshida was quickly attracted by the packaging of the game. On the cover of the game package, there are several youthful girls wearing school uniforms. Just seeing this cover, you know that this is a game about college love. After thinking of the game canon that was well received after its release, Yoshida just raised his head and glanced at Jingzonghao doubtfully, then lowered his head and continued to study the game in his hand, and then. School Days, a healing love game in the 18-year-old school. Special note, the game script is provided by the manga artist Makoto Shinkai. Because there are so many things to complain about in this game in hand, so Yoshida no longer knows where to start. Ahem. Dear readers who use computers, please keep warm. A certain cat's claws seem to be infected with a virus, visually it seems to be frostbite, and the typing is itchy and painful. Please keep warm. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. A middle school cartoonist. Author, MaleProtagonist Mao. Chapter 349. Chapter 349. The real cause of Sayaka's death is. Is there a God in this world? This is a question that perhaps no one can answer. Our destiny has been decided at the beginning of our birth. Just like a fixed program, what path to take and what choice to take, lifestyle, everything is a given, and we cannot choose or change it. This is not fatalism, nor is it the barking of pessimists lamenting the loss of the world, but the so-called God, through with the ferocious words of the Phoenix Academy. I once again warn the world, warn those who intend to resist God, warn those who intend to go against fate. All struggles are ultimately weak and inferior performances. Apart from pleasing God, this life will be meaningless. Makoto Takahashi, who was wearing a white coat, was holding a book similar to the packaging used for religious missions. Like a priest, he stood in the center of a magic circle made of tiny light bulbs, facing Ariana and his assistants. Believers, promoting some unknown doctrines. Although it was daytime, the curtains were tightly drawn and the small light bulbs glowing on the floor made the atmosphere really weird. When Yoshida came to Takahashi Makoto's house, he saw such a strange scene. If he hadn't seen that the person speaking about the teachings was Makoto Takahashi, Yoshida would have almost thought that he was in the wrong place. We need to obey our destiny, just like God drives us deep into the thorns, we will follow our destiny, just like God sends us to fall into the mortal world. Looking up at Yoshida who had just entered, Takahashi Makoto he didn't say much, but after a moment of pause, he continued to explain the teachings to the believers. In the first year of the Holy Calendar, God sent the evil spirit of the Phoenix Academy under his command to come to the world. So far, ignoring the eyes of those pseudo-believers who longed for redemption when they looked at him, Yoshida sat on the sofa beside him with his mouth twitching, picked up the manga manuscripts arranged on the table, and began to read silently. By the way, in a word, the reason why Yoshida has dark circles under his eyes is not caused by staying up late at work. It is probably because he played a certain game last night and had a little too much fun. After all, it is a forbidden game, and there are some indescribable scenes that are not suitable for children. For Yoshida, who is expected to be alone for the rest of his life, no matter the level of temptation or excitement, there is something that makes a certain editor play, and he can't stop at all. The reason for the rhythm, at least when Yoshida starts reading comics now, he has to spend more energy than usual to curb some of the random coding thoughts in his brain. The manga Dream Eater is based on the real life of a Jumumenha, so Yoshida, who has already obtained a large amount of information from his colleague Hattori, only took a rough look at the development of the plot. Let's take a look at where the manga has been serialized, and combined with the information given by Hattori, we can speculate on the next plot of the manga. Yoshida didn't put much thought into this comic. Reading the comic is just like reminiscing about the past. For example, the formation of the Fukuda group in the comics, such as the quarrels and reconciliations between the good friends of a Jumumenha in the comics, such as the mutual aid and competition between the cartoonists in the comics, such as the use of unfair competition methods against a certain purple-haired bastard. The cartoonist shares the will and decision of the enemy. Although there is no cartoonist named Phoenix Academy murder in the cartoon, many things in the cartoon have happened in reality, and the difference is not big. However, what makes Yoshida a little bit regretful is that the cartoonist Phoenix and Fierce, a middle-class cartoonist, did not appear in the manga, and the time for the little sea otter to appear has not come yet, so Yoshida, as an important member of the editorial side, although he has a boastful suspected, but considering that Yoshida is a minor boss, it should be considered visually, right. Currently he is just a supporting character in the comics, and has not participated in the official plot. At most, he is just a soy sauce character who shows his face. And Clannad, a comic serialized in a monthly magazine, has recently become the monthly magazine's trump card. According to the survey feedback from the new editor-in-chief, it is estimated that more than 90% of the readers now buy the monthly magazine because they want to read this comic, and in addition, they have received Makoto Takahashi's crazy future showdown plan. The number of readers who purchase the monthly magazine is still growing visually. Even the first volume of the single volume sold by Clannad has far exceeded the publisher's previous high-volume expectations. Huh? Tomoyo ran to Tomoya's house to urge Tomoya to go to school. Is this going to start the rhythm of Tomoyo's chapter? Looking through the manga manuscript in his hand, Yoshida had a look of surprise on his face. He looked up and saw that he was still preaching a certain doctrine. The second-grade cartoonist muttered in a low voice, "Fuko, Kotomi, now we have Tomoyo." Speaking of Aiken, is this Clannad intended to use the relationship between the male protagonist and every female character? The story should be the main line of the comic, right? Although this kind of plot looks very cute, if the comic is drawn in this mode similar to the game branch line, there is no clear main line, and readers will get tired after a long time. As a qualified editor, when reviewing comics, Yoshida not only has to look at the content of the comics, but also thinks about the comics. Well, a little exaggerated statement is the sustainability of comics. According to the current plot development of Clannad, Yoshida is naturally a little worried, especially after playing the game called School Days yesterday. Let's not talk about School Days and the previously released Kanon. Putting down the comic manuscript in his hand, Yoshida frowned, looked at the increasingly fanatical Takahashi Makoto over there, and whispered to himself. He said, "Now it seems that this Clannad is just like a game, except that Chen has decided the options and determined the ending. What is this? Are all readers considered to be game watchers? Ouch, this kind of bad taste is really Cheng's style." As a romance comic with a campus theme, Yoshida can feel that there is a certain similarity between the comic Clannad and the game School Days. The only difference is that the game allows players to make different choices in various scenarios to open different endings, while the comics have fixed options and fixed endings. Of course, the premise of all this is to ignore the 18 ban content in School Days that makes people blush and shame beyond the lower limit. For good kids who don't know, don't use the encyclopedia. As for the manga manuscript of Madoka that he hasn't read yet, Yoshida suppressed his trembling hands, hesitated again and again, and gritted his teeth and picked up the manga manuscript. Recently, due to constant calls and letters from readers complaining, most people who did not understand the situation on the editorial side, either out of curiosity or helplessness, chose to read this controversial comic from the beginning. The result: every day I have to face a group of unfriendly or even hostile colleagues, and feel them scanning my whole body with unfriendly or even hostile eyes. Yoshida said that the reason why he often appears in the eyes of Makoto Takahashi or Little Sea Otter during this period is in the world, in addition to wanting to reflect his sense of responsibility as an editor, the more important reason is naturally to choose to avoid disaster. This is probably what is called a gentleman does not stand under dangerous walls, right? Therefore, now facing the manga manuscript Madoka that can be called the source of disaster, one can imagine Yoshida's complicated mood. After taking several deep breaths, Yoshida gradually calmed down his inner uneasiness and agitation, and read the manga manuscript of Madoka. In the 9th episode, the scene at the beginning is in a hospital ward, and the characters that appear are Sayaka and her childhood sweetheart who is in the hospital. In the manga, Sayaka, who has a lot of energy girl attributes, keeps comforting her childhood sweetheart who is unable to play the violin again due to injury, but does not mention a word about the controversial senior incident. I just read the beginning, Yoshida. It gave rise to an unknown premonition. Sure enough, in the next comic, the comic tells the history of this young man who was once praised as a genius. Now, through the narration of the nurse's conversation, it is indirectly relayed to the readers that although this young man can barely walk, he can no longer move forward to the past. Playing the violin like that, seeing this, Yoshida took a breath of air and stared at Makoto Takahashi over there with a somewhat complicated expression, as if a certain boss had been reborn. He shook his head slightly, lowered his head and continued to read the comics. Although the death of their senior sister was a huge blow to Madoka and Sayaka, giving them a new understanding of magical girls, and even a little doubt about the profession they had always longed for, but, according to this foreshadowing judging from the hints provided, Miki Sagaya will definitely sign a contract with Kyubei. And Yoshida can be sure that Sayaka's desire to sign the contract must be related to that boy. Although this plot only occupies a few pages, if he can't even see this kind of foreshadowing, then Yoshida will no need to continue hanging around in the editorial department. Although the foreshadowing can be seen through, the subsequent development of the manga can be deduced, but Yoshida still maintains considerable expectations for the next plot of Madoka. Even if we know that Sayaka will sign the contract, even if we know that Sayaka will become a magical girl, even if we know the fate of the magical girl's death, but before the manga is drawn, all speculations are just delusions. Child, tell me your sins. I, the fierce lord of the Phoenix Academy, am truly willing to listen to your confession on behalf of God, and then I will send you to hell to reflect for thousands of years. While Yoshida was still immersed in the world of comics, a message suddenly came to his ears. The voice of a middle school cartoonist said, "Of course, if you have committed unforgivable sins in the past, I will send your body and soul to the devilish philosophical hell, so that in the vast sea of brotherhood, you can re-recognize yourself and strive to be a good person in the next life." Will he die? Will Sayaka die after becoming a magical girl? Yoshida, who was already immersed in his own delusions, was actually exempted from the mental oppression of a certain middle school student. In a sense, it is gratifying. Isn't that natural? Makoto Takahashi casually glanced at the comic, and then told Yoshida, who looked depressed, "My favorite cat, don't show that you saw your girlfriend having sex with someone else. You're so confused. Have you ever had a chance? Besides, didn't I give you a hint about Sayaka's arrangement a long time ago?" Sure enough, this is a depressing manga. After the cartoonist himself confirmed that Sayaka would die, Yoshida felt terrible. After being immersed in the world of sadness for a long time, Yoshida slowly raised his head and asked Takahashi Makoto with a puzzled look, "What do you mean by hint? In this episode, I only saw the reason why Sayaka would become a magical girl, but what is the hint about death?" Humph. I knew that you, my cat, had never read the comics carefully. Takahashi Makoto snorted disdainfully for Yoshida's wrong answer, but still gave the correct answer. The dialogue on the lower right side of the second to last page of the second episode of Madoka Madoka, because Sayaka set up a death flag at that time, so, you know. At this moment, Yoshida suddenly felt a sense of "oh my god" and wanted to torture Takahashi Makoto. Tisk. Haven't you remembered it yet? As expected, ordinary bones are ordinary ancients. Even after tens of thousands of years of baptism, they are still the kind of goods that are not expected. Takahashi Makoto looked at Yoshida's depressed look and unceremoniously used chase, which was visually effective. "My cat, I will be merciful today and update your understanding of the world. This is..." Yoshida was confused when he saw Makoto Takahashi quickly dial a number and handed the phone to him, but after the call was connected, Yoshida suddenly understood. Eiji Niizuma? I am, not Teacher Howin's cat, but Yoshida. I want to ask you about the second episode of the manga Madoka Madoka. Hey. Awesome, awesome. As expected of Eiji Niizuma, thank you, sorry for bothering you. How is it? Makoto Takahashi looked at Yoshida jokingly. By the way, Makoto Takahashi, do you know how much you deserve a beating now? I didn't expect that Nizuma Eiji could say it directly without thinking. Yoshida returned the phone to Takahashi Makoto, with a complex expression on his face, and replied with difficulty, "This kind of memory, as expected, you are all a group of monsters, non-human beings. So do you know now? The cause of death of Miki Sayaka is..." Takahashi Makoto looked at Yoshida expectantly. If these pitfalls and some unconventional logic are excluded, Takahashi Makoto's image at this moment is undoubtedly an extremely patient teacher. I still don't know. Yoshida was also very single, and he didn't perfunctorily answer Takahashi Makoto this time. Although Yoshida himself knew that he would definitely suffer all kinds of contempt and ridicule from Takahashi Makoto in the future, but, who the hell could deduce the cause of Sayaka's death from that kind of words? By the way, what is the special meaning of "you are destined companions who met across time and space"? Huh? You still don't understand? Takahashi Makoto slammed the table, a look of disappointment on his face. Isn't it obvious? Miki Sayaka died because of spoilers. Spoilers ruin a life, isn't that the truth? Hee hee. For Takahashi Makoto's second-year logic, the normal Yoshida really kneels down. A middle school cartoonist. Author, MaleProtagonist Mao. Chapter 350. Did Sayaka really die in spoilers? If this were really the case, then humans who wrote novels or drew comics as their profession would have long since disappeared in the long river of history. After all, Novels and comics are inseparable from foreshadowing. If an author dies because of foreshadowing in a novel or comic, that would be a really sad thing. Therefore, Yoshida does not believe this explanation at all. Even if Yoshida is to believe it, the premise must be based on the reality that a certain second-level manga artist who has made spoilers died immediately. But looking at Makoto Takahashi's current state, I think it would be completely unreasonable to live for another few decades, so who would believe this kind of cheating reason? Yoshida threw the manga manuscript angrily and roared angrily at Makoto Takahashi. He even forgot about the difference in force between himself and Makoto Takahashi because of his anger, and stretched out his hand to grab him. Takahashi Makoto's mouth, is it this mouth that originally said that Madoka is a healing manga? Is it this mouth? The seniors are already dead, and then it's Sayaka's turn. My familiar cat, what you said is wrong. It's not just Sayaka who will die next, but also Kyoko. Is this adding fuel to the fire? Speaking of which, Makoto Takahashi, you are really awesome. Your mouth has been twisted by Yoshida, but you can still speak the universal language of mankind. The correct statement is that Sayaka and Kyoko died together, so who will die next? This way of expressing it is wrong. According to the development of the plot, it is more appropriate to call it a double kill. A double kill? Isn't it enough to kill one of you? Yoshida continued to pull Takahashi Makoto's mouth harder, with a darkening light in his eyes. And who is the Kyoko you just mentioned? A magical girl who triggered the shattered void when she fell in love with Sayaka and killed her. Makoto Takahashi slapped Yoshida's devil's claw away and explained while rubbing his somewhat red mouth, according to the current progress of the manga, let's look at it. It is estimated that Kyoko will appear in episode 10 to 11. My familiar cat, don't look at me like this. As for Kyoko's debut time, although I prefer to appear in episode 10. But the King of Black Flame may delay it a bit. If you want to know the specific situation, you should go find the followers of the King of Black Flame. After watching Makoto Takahashi remain silent for a moment, Yoshida suddenly sneered, Chang, if we really follow your theory and spoilers must die, you who have done so many spoilers, absolutely dead. Ha 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 ha, my beloved cat, you are so sweet. You must know that the fierce demon king of the Phoenix Academy has immunity from death. This reason must have been made up by Makoto Takahashi, right? Otherwise, what was the reason for the brief silence before? And that embarrassing giggle from before, not at all the madness that a normal middle school student should have. The manga manuscript, I accepted it. Although every time he receives the manga manuscript from Takahashi Makoto, Yoshida said that various unexpected situations will occur, but this time is definitely the most troublesome one. In this regard, Yoshida can swear by his soul as editor. Hey, my familiar cat, don't you have anything to say about that game? I don't remember my familiar being so rude. When he saw Yoshida packing up the manga manuscript and preparing to leave, Takahashi Makoto suddenly he laughed sadly. As a tester, you should at least provide feedback on the game review. I almost forgot if you didn't say this. Yoshida recalled the bloody hatchet ending when he cleared the level for the first time, and the look on his face suddenly became quite strange. He reached out and patted Takahashi Makoto's shoulder. Yoshida looked at Makoto Takahashi seriously, and after a long silence, he spoke with difficulty, Chang, although as the editor in charge, you shouldn't say these things, but, if you have time, you'd better find a psychologist. Doctor, let's take a look. Because at the beginning of this game, it told the story of pure love between ignorant boys and girls. Although scenes that were not suitable for children under the 18-year-old ban were gradually added later, which made the game more playable. However, those ferocious characters to the heartbreaking ending, for gamers who have not reached the level of God of Strategy, it is really a kind of mental destruction. As the provider of the game script, Yoshida really feels that Makoto Takahashi, who can write such a plot, should see a psychiatrist. Although this is true, But, since even Chuyunibu cannot be cured, what about the ghost-type Chuyunibu that has mutated? Although the night was very long, Yoshida played the game several times and never got a good ending. The best ending should be after Guiyanyi was given by a certain yellow hair, here has been harmonized, together with the scumbag Makoto, he will also trap the world in front of the tram. Tisk. It seems that the effect is not too impressive. Makoto Takahashi has been carefully observing Yoshida's facial expressions, and after a long time he sighed with regret. After playing the game, my familiar cat only has there are signs of blackening, but not complete blackening. Speaking of which, playing a game can turn a person into a black person. I guess only the legendary Nameless Pharaoh can do that, right? Moreover, the reason why Wang Xiang turned on the darkening at that time was partly because of the tricks of a certain insect scumbag, and partly because he was stimulated by the news of the suspected death of his gay friend, right? Not to mention. By the way, Makoto Takahashi, have you forgotten that this kind of game called School Days, for Yoshida who is still single and waiting to change jobs to become a dependent of the god of law, although when calculating the damage, Yoshida is single attribute, the scum attribute will produce a hostile effect and double the combat power, but the final effect will still be halved according to visual inspection. Although Yoshida did not achieve the test results expected by Makoto Takahashi, this did not affect the release of the game. During the promotion of the game, Jingzonghao Jisang, who has been in charge of this matter, once told Takahashi Makoto, although Takahashi Makoto really wanted to estimate the people who would be tricked and killed on the spot, but because he was busy with the manga manuscript, so this difficult and devilish task is all left to Sabas-chan to complete. Because he knew Makoto Takahashi's evil pursuit in writing this plot, a certain smiling omnipotent butler, when promoting the game, specifically emphasized that there would be a surprise in the game notes, but what was this surprise, until the game was officially released? After that, everyone realized that the screenwriter of this game was actually Makoto Shinkai, the mangaka who currently serializes Madoka. Taking advantage of human curiosity to promote the game, should it be said that this is Butler Sabas-chan who has mastered the master-level skill of playing with people's human nature? Among the readers of the comics, there are many game players. After learning the news, some players of the right age immediately bought the game. After all, a newcomer cartoonist who has just debuted actually still has time to participate in the production of a game while serializing it, and it is also an 18-ban game. Curiosity killed the cat. This was originally intended to warn humans that when facing some curious things, they should retain the minimum level of vigilance to prevent accidents. However, many people in this world find it difficult to do this. Especially the readers who were tricked by Senior Headless incident before. What's more, after learning that School Days is an 18-ban game, many humans are bound by conventional knowledge and do not consider the possibility that this game contains countless huge pits. After all, for people in this world, everyone knows the real selling point of the 18-ban games, but, even though I say this, it also uses, here has been harmonized, as a selling point, but the game how the plot is, it has a great impact on the game. In this world, Makoto Takahashi learned from Jingzonghao Jisang that most of the 18-ban games are very harmonious and loving, at least there are very few games similar to School Days is a curious type of story. Speaking of such a heartbreaking ending, the only one who can think of it, maybe you are the only one who exudes the aura of a depraved devil from his appearance to his soul. This was after reading the game written by Makoto Takahashi. After the plot, a certain Jisang gave an evaluation with a complicated expression on his face. So, without considering the deception of a certain big devil, the reader, a gamer of the right age, bought the game out of curiosity, and then, the chain of tragedies began. For these people, after experiencing the U-turn incident of their senior, when they were about to play a game to change their mood, they suddenly discovered that the game was more exciting than the comics visually. The triggers of various hatchets, ships, and minotaurs have caused people who originally wanted to change their mood by playing games to fall into an abyss of more entanglement and depression, and what makes these people most speechless is that all this has happened. The culprit is actually the same person, the unforgivable Shinheiken. Holy shit. What's going on with this game? I thought it was a, here has been harmonized, game before, but I didn't expect that when I played it later, the, here has been harmonized, part was there, but the ending was what the hell? The world was actually chopped down by Gui Yanyi. That bastard Shinkai Makoto. My favorite girl, Kotoha, was actually given up by that yellow hair. This has been blocked, that scumbag Ito Makoto. Huang Mao must die. Scumbag Makoto must die. Weavuo, my favorite Setsuna Loli squad leader, Weavuo. Zakan must die. By the way, the Zakan mentioned here does not only refer to Ito Makoto in the game, but also the game script provider, the manga artist Shinkai Makoto, who made the senior sister turn around. Second, it was because of the plot about my senior sister that I was tortured so badly that I wanted to play games to change my mood. But, the scumbags must die. Upstairs. If Makoto Ito is a scumbag in the second dimension, then Makoto Shinkai is a scumbag in the third dimension. Both must die. Both scumbags must die. Oh, 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 I feel it, this is how it feels. Tisk, 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 the resentment and curse that makes my soul happy. Makoto Takahashi was browsing the comments of the readers and gamers who were tricked on the internet. He murmured with a smile on his face, "It's really delicious." So, Takahashi Makoto, have you turned on the demon instead of Honkai mode? A certain cat almost died in a spoiler. Haha, now I finally understand the meaning of seeking death.